You want my money, I want your fire. Let's see who gets burned first. The words hit me before I even had time to sit down. The man behind the obsidian black desk leaned back in his leather chair, watching me with the kind of lazy confidence you only see in people who own entire city blocks, or apparently souls. I told myself I wasn't here to be intimidated. After all, I'd faced a year of slammed doors and polite rejections from investors who loved my pitch deck but weren't ready to commit. This was just another meeting. Another chance before I watched my startup, Lumatech, die a slow, underfunded death. And then there was him. Kieran Ashford. He was infuriatingly elegant. Perfectly tailored navy suit, a dark tie, cufflinks that caught the afternoon light like tiny sparks. His hair was black with the faintest wave, his smile a slash of irony against sharply cut cheekbones. He had the kind of voice that curled around the edges of words, low and rough enough to sound like trouble, and expensive whiskey. And of course, he knew it. The office itself didn't help. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline behind him. The city sprawled out in endless grays and silvers. The walls were deep mahogany, the shelves lined with books whose titles were too far to read but definitely screamed old money or secret societies. The air smelled faintly of leather and something spiced, cinnamon maybe or danger. I smoothed my blazer and forced my legs to stop shaking. "So," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "should I start my pitch? Or do you want to keep opening with vaguely threatening one-liners?" One corner of his mouth curved upward. "By all means. Convince me." I launched into my well-rehearsed speech about Lumatech, about our revolutionary code that could cut energy costs for data centers by 20%, about the growing interest from smaller firms who loved the product but couldn't pay enough to keep us afloat. Kieran didn't interrupt. He didn't nod either. He just watched, his chin resting on one hand, eyes a shade of gray too sharp to be anything but calculating. When I finished, the silence stretched. "Finally," he said, "impressive, ambitious, passionate." I blinked. "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe." He stood and walked toward the window, hands in his pockets, looking. Every inch like a magazine spread for rich and dangerous men monthly. "You have the spark. I like that. But sparks burn out. I need to know if you can handle the fire." I crossed my arms. "With all due respect, Mr. Ashford, I'm not here for metaphors. I'm here for funding." He turned, grin widening. "And I'm here for entertainment. Looks like we both might get what we want." My patience cracked. "Is this a game to you?" "Of course not," he said smoothly. "Games have rules." I hated that my pulse jumped a little. "We talk numbers then. Real ones, this time." He asked sharp questions about our burn rate, our tech roadmap, our competitors. I answered each one, clinging to professionalism like a life raft even as his occasional smirks made me feel like I'd already lost some battle I didn't understand. Finally, he slid a contract across the desk. The paper was thick, the ink bold. "I'll wire the funds today," he said. "In return, I expect weekly reports. Full transparency, no surprises." "That's it?" I asked cautiously. "For now." His eyes glinted. "But understand, Miss Cole. I don't invest in people who quit, or break easily." I signed before my better judgment could argue. Because what choice did I have? As I handed the pen back, he leaned closer, voice dropping to something just above a whisper. "Now you belong to me," Kieran said, smiling like a wolf. "At least on paper." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. I should have known better. 3 days after signing the contract, I realized Kieran Ashford had a very different definition of investor. Most investors write checks, maybe attend a quarterly meeting, send the occasional email about projections. Kieran? He ran my calendar like a military operation. At 6 a.m. sharp, my phone started buzzing on my nightstand. I groaned, fumbling for it. "Hello? Good morning, Miss Cole." Kieran's smooth voice drawled through the speaker. "I've scheduled 3 client meetings for you today. I expect written summaries by evening." I sat up, hair sticking in 6 directions. "It's 6 a.m. An excellent observation," he said, sounding amused. "You're awake. Good. Productivity begins now." I made a strangled noise that might have been English, might have been profanity, and hung up. By the time I stumbled into the Luma Tech office, a cramped but determined two-room setup with peeling, paint and a whiteboard full of messy equations, he'd already emailed me a full itinerary, color-coded, with bullet points and notes. Do not drink that caramel latte again. Too much sugar. Slows you down. Sleep schedule, unacceptable. Bed by midnight. Up by 6. Stop leaving your car unlocked. I wanted to throw my laptop out the window. Instead, I stormed into our tiny meeting room, where Lena was nursing coffee like it was oxygen. She was my best friend, our PR manager, and the only person I trusted to tell me when I was being ridiculous. He's insane, I announced. She looked up. The investor? Yes, the investor. He's running my life like some corporate overlord, Lena smirked. To be fair, he is funding us. Maybe he's just committed? Committed? I waved the printed schedule in her face. He texted me to eat more protein. Who does that? Lena leaned back, sipping her coffee with maddening calm. Someone who's too hot for common sense, apparently. I glared. Do not call my investor hot. She grinned. Oh, come on. The man looks like he eats stock market crashes for breakfast. I'm just saying. If he told me to go to bed on time, I might listen. Traitor, I muttered. The door opened. Speak of the devil, literally. Kieran walked in like he owned the place. Which, technically, he sort of did now. His suit was charcoal gray today, tie perfectly knotted, expression as unreadable as a poker champion's. Miss Cole, he said smoothly, have you reviewed the meeting schedule? Yes, I snapped. And here's the thing, this is my company, not your playground. He tilted his head, as if considering whether I was amusing or simply foolish. Profit doesn't care about your feelings, Miss Cole. Neither do deadlines. I sputtered. I am the one running this company. And I, he said evenly, am the one ensuring it survives long enough for you to keep running it. There was no heat in his tone, no arrogance, just cold, cutting logic. It was infuriating. Lena's eyes bounced between us like she was watching the best reality show of the season. Kieran glanced at my coffee cup then, lips curving faintly. That, he said pointing, is the 3rd cup today. Switch to tea. Less caffeine crash. I stared. Are you monitoring my caffeine intake? Of course, he said simply. Sleep deprivation kills productivity. So does over-reliance on stimulants. Sleep is for losers, Miss Cole, but so is low output. I opened my mouth. Closed it. You're unbelievable. Thank you, he said, like I'd complimented him. Lena choked on her coffee, laughing. I considered strangling them both. I told myself this was strictly business, a meeting. Dinner only because Kieran insisted he preferred discussing strategy somewhere civilized. And yet, when I walked into the Silver Swan, all crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and waiters who looked like they judged your shoes, I felt like I'd been tricked into a date. Kieran was already there, of course. He sat at a corner table with the skyline glittering behind him, tie loosened just enough to look deliberate. Miss Cole, he said smoothly, standing as I approached. Right on time. Impressive. It's called being professional, I muttered, sliding into my chair. Some of us work for a living. Some of us ensure others can work for a living, he countered, eyes glinting. I ignored the flutter in my stomach. Professional. Strictly professional. The first 10 minutes went well. We discussed client outreach, funding milestones, possible hires. I kept my eyes on the spreadsheet in front of me. Not on the way the candlelight caught in his hair or the fact that he rolled his sleeves halfway up, like a man who knew he could get away with it. Then Mark arrived. Our brilliant but perpetually miserable co-founder slumped into the 3rd chair, looking like someone had personally insulted his code. Sorry I'm late, he said, though he didn't sound sorry. Traffic. Kieran arched one perfect eyebrow. I assumed you'd left early enough to account for that. Mark blinked. It's traffic. Fascinating, Kieran murmured, turning back to me. I bit back a smile. Mark ordered a steak the size of his self-pity and spent the next 20 minutes complaining about unrealistic deadlines and unnecessary investor interference. We can't just keep bending to his schedule, Mark grumbled, gesturing at Kieran with his fork. He's everywhere. Calls, emails, progress reports. It's like he owns the place. He owns part of the place, I reminded him through clenched teeth. Mark scowled. Still, he doesn't understand the creative process. Kieran finally looked up, all polite menace. I understand profit margins. They don't wait for inspiration. Mark opened his mouth, thought better of it, and drowned his rebellion in mashed potatoes. I turned back to Kieran. Do you ever stop pushing? He studied me for a moment. Do you? I hesitated. That's different. It's my company. Exactly, he said softly. And you're burning yourself alive for it. The words landed heavier than I expected. I hated that he was right. Kieran leaned back, eyes sharp. You care too much about what people think, Miss Cole, about being fair, about feelings. This business doesn't reward humanity, it rewards results. And you? I shot back. What does it reward for you? His smile was slow, dangerous. Leverage. The air between us tightened like a wire. Mark mumbled something about dictators under his breath. I ignored him. Do you ever stop talking in riddles? I asked Kieran. Only when I'm bored, he said, voice low. Luckily, you haven't bored me yet. I pretended not to hear the yet echoing in my chest. By the time dessert arrived, Mark had sulked into silence, and I'd given up pretending this dinner wasn't a battle I was losing. Professional. Strictly professional. And yet, when Kieran handed me the revised contract timelines with that maddening half-smile, I knew two things. 1, he'd get exactly what he wanted. And 2, I was in serious trouble. The office was nearly empty when I found out. The only light came from the rows of monitors still humming with code, casting pale blue over whiteboards covered in deadlines and equations we were running out of time to solve. It was close to midnight, and the building felt hollow, just me, the machines, and the creeping dread that had been stalking me all week. I was reviewing the latest commits when the message popped up on our internal chat. Anonymous, check the competitor's repository. I frowned, clicked the link, and froze. Because there it was, our code, not copied, not stolen, uploaded with full access keys that matched ours exactly. Mark's keys. The air left my lungs in a sharp rush. For a second, I couldn't even think. This was months of work, investor funding, client trust, all handed to the people who'd been circling us like sharks since launch day. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called Mark. Straight to voicemail. The office walls felt closer suddenly, the quiet unbearable. My reflection in the dark window looked pale and furious, eyes too wide. And then the door opened. Kieran stepped inside like he owned the night itself. Perfect suit, no tie, coat over his arm like this was a casual stroll instead of a crisis. Working late, Miss Cole? He asked mildly. I spun around. Did you know? His gaze flicked to the screen, then back to me. Yes. It hit like a slap. You knew? Of course. His voice was calm, infuriatingly so. It's been happening for weeks. The heat rose in my chest. And you didn't think to mention it? He shrugged out of his coat, draping it over a chair like this was any other conversation. I let you see who you hired, Kieran said evenly. I stared at him. You let this happen? I let you learn, he corrected, eyes cool and steady. Anger flared, sharp and bright. You could have stopped it. Before we lost everything. Lost? He tilted his head. We haven't lost. Not yet. I slammed the laptop shut. You don't get to play teacher while my company bleeds out. Finally. Something flickered in his expression. A hint of sharpness under all that composure. You think this is the worst thing that will happen to you in business? Kieran's voice was still low, but it cut like broken glass. You think betrayal ends here, with some underpaid co-founder selling scraps of your code? My hands curled into fists. He was supposed to be my partner. And he chose profit over loyalty, Kieran said flatly. As will many others. Welcome to the real world, Miss Cole. I wanted to scream. Or cry. Or both. Instead, I spat. You manipulated this. Just to prove a point. His brows rose, faint amusement touching his mouth. Manipulated? No. I anticipated. Same thing. No, he said softly, stepping closer. Because manipulation requires lies. I told you from the start. This business doesn't reward naivety. You insisted on trusting everyone. I backed against the edge of the desk, the glow from the monitors painting us both in cold light. So, this is my fault now? I didn't say that. His eyes caught mine, gray and unyielding. But you hand people your trust like free samples, and then you're shocked when someone takes more than you offered. I hated that he was right. Hated it so much my throat ached. Clients will hear about this, I said tightly. We'll lose them. Not if we move fast, Kieran said. I already secured injunctions. By morning the competitors will be frozen out legally. But I needed you to see the cost of blind loyalty before I cleaned up the mess. I stared at him, chest tight. You're infuriating. And you, he said calmly, are too human for your own good. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was sharp enough to cut. Finally, I shoved my laptop into my bag. Next time, I said, voice low, warn me before you teach me a lesson. Kieran smiled faintly, like I'd said something funny. Next time, Miss Cole, he murmured. Try not to need one. The rain started sometime after midnight, a slow drizzle that turned the city streets into rivers of gold under the streetlights. By the time Lena left the office, it had thickened into a steady downpour. She was halfway across the parking lot when she saw him. Kieran. He stood beneath the skeletal frame of the half-built parking structure next door, sheltered from the worst of the rain, facing a man in a soaked business suit. The stranger looked pale, frantic, like someone who'd been cornered. Lena slowed, one hand gripping her umbrella as she squinted through the curtain of water. That's when the air changed. It hummed. Sparks, real sparks, sharp and white, snapped through the space between Kieran and the man, cutting the darkness like lightning, caught mid-strike. The man gasped, clutching his chest as something, glowing, swirling, peeled away from him and into Kieran's outstretched hand. Light bent toward Kieran like he was pulling the storm itself into his palm. For one frozen, heart-thudding moment, Lena could see him clearly. Not the expensive suit, not the charming smile. Something older, sharper. Shadows curled at his feet where there shouldn't have been any, twisting like living things before melting into the night again. The deal ended as suddenly as it began. The man stumbled back, eyes wide with terror, then bolted into the rain without looking back. Kieran pocketed whatever he'd taken, collected, and turned away, calm as ever. Lena's breath hitched. She backed up slowly, heels splashing through puddles, heart hammering. When she finally reached the office door again, she was soaked straight through. And shaking. By the time she found me, I was packing up my laptop, still furious from earlier. Natalie, she gasped, pushing wet hair from her face. God. You need to hear this. I looked up. What happened? Why do you look like you just crawled out of a horror movie? It's him, she said. Kieran. I saw him in the parking lot, with some guy. There was light, like electricity, and... I frowned. Lena? He's not human, Nat. I blinked. What? She gripped my arm, rainwater dripping from her sleeves. I saw something wrong. Like a deal, but not normal. You have to stay away from him. I almost laughed, because it was ridiculous. Except Lena didn't scare easily. And she was pale, really pale. Where is he now? I asked tightly. She hesitated. Left a minute ago. Looked like nothing happened. Of course he did. I found him outside, leaning casually against his car, like he wasn't possibly the most infuriating man alive. Miss Cole, he said smoothly when he saw me. Late night? I marched up, anger snapping through me like static. What the hell was that? One brow rose. You'll have to be more specific. In the parking lot, I hissed. The man, the light, what did you do? Business, Kieran said simply. Business? My voice cracked. You call that business? He smiled faintly, rain sliding off his coat like he wasn't even getting wet. Everything has a price, Miss Cole. I just collect. I stared at him, heart pounding, realizing two things at once. One, Lena hadn't been exaggerating. And two, I'd signed a contract with someone who wasn't even human. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse, and for a second, I wondered if I'd just made the worst decision of my life. The place looked like something out of a glossy magazine for billionaires with questionable morals. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, lights glittering against the rain-streaked glass. Everything inside gleamed. Black marble, steel, leather furniture so sleek it might cut you if you sat down too quickly. Kieran stood by the bar, pouring wine like he hadn't been caught performing supernatural light shows in the parking lot less than 24 hours ago. "Welcome, Miss Cole," he said smoothly. "You look like a woman about to stage an intervention." "Don't flatter yourself," I snapped, shrugging out of my damp coat. "I'm here for answers." He handed me a glass, completely unbothered. "Of course. Sit, drink, yell at me if you must. I find it endearing." I didn't sit. "You're not human." "No," he said easily. "I'm not." The casual way he said it made my skin crawl. Like he was admitting he drove a slightly illegal sports car, not whatever this was. "So what then?" I demanded. "Vampire? Alien? Rogue magician?" He chuckled, low and warm. "Demon." The word hung there, heavy. I stared. "Demon," I repeated flatly. "More specifically," Kieran said, finally sitting at the massive dining table and gesturing for me to do the same. "A deal maker. Contracts, bargains, transactions of unusual sorts, souls, ambition, fortunes. Everyone wants something, Miss Cole. I merely broker the exchange." I sat because my knees didn't trust me to keep standing. "And people just sign up for this?" "Constantly." He took a sip of wine. "Most don't even read the fine print." "Humans rarely do." I glared. "So you're basically a demonic venture capitalist?" Kieran's smile widened. Finally, someone gets it. I wanted to throw the wine at him. Instead, I drank it. He leaned back, studying me like I was another contract waiting to be negotiated. "There are rules," Kieran continued. "No one gets something for nothing. Every wish, every success, every shortcut, it all has a price. Some pay with time, some with loyalty. Some with pieces of themselves they didn't know were negotiable. And you collect," I said bitterly. "Always." The city lights reflected in his glass, sharp and cold. "Why?" I asked finally. "What's the point? Money? Power?" He tilted his head, as though the question amused him. "I've been doing this a long time, Miss Cole, long enough to learn that mortals ruin themselves faster than I ever could. I simply expedite the process." "That's sick." "That's business," he corrected. I set my glass down harder than necessary. "So, what's my price?" Kieran's gaze lingered on me. Unreadable. "That," he said softly, "remains to be seen." I should have left. I should have run screaming from the fancy demon penthouse with its too-perfect view of the city and the man who talked about souls like line items on a spreadsheet. Instead, I sat there, pulse hammering, while he poured me more wine and smiled like the devil he claimed to be. And the worst part? Somehow, it didn't feel like a threat. The hackathon was supposed to be our victory lap. 2 days of caffeine, sleeplessness, and coding brilliance to show off Luma Tech's new features before launch. A chance to prove to investors, and to ourselves, that the chaos of the last few weeks hadn't broken us. Instead, it broke everything else. The convention hall buzzed with hundreds of programmers, wires snaking across the floor, screens glowing in the dim light. The air smelled like energy drinks, bad coffee, and ambition burning itself alive. I was halfway through explaining our new energy optimization prototype to a cluster of potential clients when Lena sprinted over, face pale. "Nat," she gasped. "It's the competitors. They're here. With someone." "Someone?" Then, I saw him. A man in a sharp crimson suit, walking through the crowd like a shark slicing through water. Every step felt deliberate, predatory. and trailing behind him, our biggest rival company, the one that had been circling us for months, hungry for blood. Lena grabbed my arm. He made a deal. I heard them talking. I didn't need to ask what kind of deal. Not after what I'd learned about Kieran. The man in red smiled across the room, eyes glinting gold for half a heartbeat before returning to human normal. Another demon. Of course. I found Kieran near the main stage, watching the chaos with his usual calm detachment. "We have a problem," I said tightly. He didn't even turn. "We have several." My phone buzzed then. An alert from the company bank account. A withdrawal. A large one. My stomach sank as I checked the logs. Mark. He'd taken the money. I barely had time to process that before another notification hit. Our code repository. A massive data transfer. Straight to a competitor's server. My hands shook around the phone. He took the money and the code. He's gone. Kieran finally turned, eyes like sharpened steel. "Where?" he asked. I don't know," I stammered. He didn't answer. Just started walking toward the man in red and the rivals gathering near the main stage. I followed. Pulse hammering. The air changed before Kieran even spoke. 1 second, it was just noise. Keyboards clacking, people shouting over each other, music blaring from the speakers. The next, it felt heavy. Like the whole room held its breath. The man in red grinned when he saw us. "Ashford, always a pleasure." "Lucien," Kieran said flatly. "Still scraping from the bottom, I see." Lucien's smile widened. "Competition keeps things interesting. Your little startup looks tasty. Thought I'd help myself." I glared. "With stolen code?" Lucien didn't even glance at me. "With opportunity. Mortals are so eager to sell pieces of themselves when the price is right." My blood ran cold. Mark. He hadn't just sold the code. He'd sold something else. "Leave," Kieran said softly. Lucien laughed. "Or what? You'll scowl me to death?" That was when everything happened at once. The lights flickered. The air crackled with heat, and Kieran stopped pretending to be human. Shadows bled from his feet, curling like smoke, rising behind him in the shape of something vast, winged and furious. The ground trembled beneath my shoes as the air split with a sound like tearing metal. People screamed. Lucien stepped back, face twisting. "Careful, Ashford," he hissed. "Too much exposure, and the council will..." "Leave," Kieran repeated, voice layered with something ancient that shook the walls. Lucien vanished. 1 second there, the next gone, leaving only the smell of smoke and the echo of fear behind. The room was chaos. People shouting, evacuating, tripping over cables. I stood frozen, heart pounding, staring at Kieran as the shadows sank back into the floor, leaving only the man in the suit, calm and precise, adjusting his cufflinks like he hadn't just terrified an entire building. "You..." My voice broke. "What was that?" He glanced at me, expression unreadable. "Protection," he said simply. My phone buzzed again. Mark's name. A single text, "Sorry." Couldn't resist the offer. The floor felt like it tilted under my feet. Kieran looked at the message over my shoulder, eyes cold. "Then we hunt," he said softly. And for the first time, I believed him. The office felt like a war zone after the hackathon. Half the team hadn't slept in 48 hours. Screens still glowed with frantic lines of code as we tried to patch the damage Mark left behind. Clients were calling. Investors wanted updates. Every whiteboard was covered in crossed-out plans and red markers spelling deadlines we couldn't possibly meet. And through it all, Kieran stood like the eye of the storm, calm, precise, issuing orders that somehow kept the entire thing from collapsing. I hated that part of me was grateful. Late that night, when most of the team had finally gone home, I found him in the conference room, standing by the window. The city glittered behind him, rain still streaking down the glass like the world was mourning something we hadn't named yet. "You saved us today," I admitted reluctantly. He didn't turn. "It was necessary?" "For the company," I said. "For you," he corrected softly. Something in my chest stuttered. Finally he looked at me. "I came into this expecting nothing but profit, Miss Cole." "Another deal." Another mortal chasing ambition, until it burned them alive. I crossed my arms, pulse kicking up. And now? His eyes held mine, gray and unreadable. Now I find myself invested. The word landed heavier than I expected. He said it like a confession, like something that cost him to admit. I didn't know what to do with that. The door burst open then, and Lena marched in, clutching a folder like it might explode. "I found it," she announced. We both turned. "Found what?" I asked. "A way to break the contract." She dropped the folder on the table. "But it's ugly." Kieran's expression didn't change. But the air tightened somehow. Lena opened the folder, flipping through pages of legalese and something else. Old symbols. The kind you didn't find in law books. "It severs the agreement," she said. "But it would cost you control of the company. A big chunk of profit too. Investors would walk. Some clients maybe." I stared at the papers, my stomach knotting. Freedom. That's what I'd wanted, wasn't it? No more Kieran pulling strings. No more deals with fine print I didn't understand. But the thought of him gone felt like tearing out a piece of the company itself. Of me. "Do it," Kieran said suddenly. I turned to him, startled. "What?" "If you want out," he said evenly, "then do it. I won't stop you." Anger flared. "You sound like you don't care." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "On the contrary. But I won't keep you in a deal you don't want." I looked between him, the folder, the rain outside blurring the city lights. Freedom, or him? Logic said this was easy. He was a demon. He terrified investors, competitors, entire hackathons. My life had been chaos since he walked into it. And yet. I closed the folder. "Not yet," I said finally. My voice shook more than I wanted it to. "I'm not ready to lose everything." Kieran studied me for a long moment, then nodded once, slow and deliberate. Neither of us said what we both knew, that everything didn't just mean the company anymore. The conference room felt too bright for what I was about to do. Morning sunlight spilled across the long table, turning the stacks of contracts into blinding white reminders that my entire future was balanced on a signature. Kieran sat at the far end, perfectly composed as always. Dark suit immaculate. Hands folded like a man awaiting a verdict he already knew. Lena hovered near the door, silent but tense, as if she expected the whole building to crack open the moment I spoke. I took a deep breath. "I'm ending the contract." The words felt heavy, final, like a door slamming shut. Kieran didn't move, didn't speak. The only sign he'd heard me was the faint flicker in his eyes, a glint of something sharp and dangerous. "You understand what that means," he said finally. "Yes." My voice wavered, but I forced it steady. "We lose some profit, maybe control. Some investors will leave. But I can't keep living like this. I need my freedom back." Lena shifted uneasily, but didn't interrupt. Kieran rose slowly, every movement precise, controlled, too controlled. "After everything I've done to keep this company alive, you want to throw it away?" "I'm not throwing it away," I snapped. "I'm saving myself before there's nothing left of me in it." For the first time since I'd met him, his composure cracked. Just a little. His jaw tightened. And when he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. "You think you've been nothing but a pawn to me?" I blinked. "Haven't I?" He crossed the room in 2 long strides, stopping just short of touching me. His presence was overwhelming. Shadow and heat, and something I couldn't name curling under my skin. "You were never just a deal to me, Natalie." The words landed like a punch. For a moment, the room felt too small. "I told myself this was business," he continued, softer now, almost like it cost him to say it. "Profit, control, another contract in an endless list." But somewhere along the way, he broke off, exhaling sharply. It became more. I didn't know what to say. I'd wanted freedom. I still did, but the thought of cutting him out completely made my chest ache in ways I didn't want to analyze. "I can't stay tied to you like this," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not with all the fine print. Not with you holding all the power." He was silent for a long moment, then nodded once. A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Fine. Kieran said. I'll honor your choice. But know this, Natalie. Once it's done, there's no going back. My throat tightened. Lena has the paperwork, I said, forcing myself to meet his eyes. She'll handle the transition. He turned toward the windows, shoulders rigid, like he couldn't look at me anymore. Do what you must, Kieran said quietly. It should have felt like victory. So why did it feel like loss? The new Lumatech office didn't look anything like the battlefield we'd survived. Sunlight streamed through wide glass windows. Plants lined the walls. Desks buzzed with energy instead of panic. Someone had even set up a coffee bar in the corner with a ridiculous chalkboard menu that changed daily. It felt alive, like we'd finally stopped surviving and started building. The competitors never saw it coming. The same demon who promised them power turned on them the moment someone offered him a bigger deal. Apparently, loyalty wasn't in the job description for Hellspawn. Their funding vanished overnight. Their stolen code crashed spectacularly when Kieran locked them out with legal clauses and magic I didn't even want to understand. The vultures scattered. Lumatech survived. And now, we were here. Kieran stood in the center of the bright new conference room, looking as out of place among the motivational posters and sunlight as a wolf in a petting zoo. On the table between us lay a single sheet of paper. The new contract. I picked it up slowly. This doesn't look like the others. That's because it isn't, he said. No hidden clauses. No fine print designed to keep you up at night. Equal terms. 50-50. I glanced up sharply. You? Giving up control? I thought that was your favorite thing. He smiled faintly. Control is overrated. Besides, I hear partnerships work better when one party isn't constantly threatening to sell their soul. I rolled my eyes, but my hands trembled slightly as I signed. This wasn't just business anymore. We both knew it. The door burst open then, and Lena sauntered in carrying 2 cups of coffee and the air of someone who had seen far too much. So, she grinned. Honeymoon in hell? I groaned. Lena. But Kieran didn't miss a beat. He took the coffee from her like he owned the place, which, technically, he half did now, and said smoothly, Darling, it's called market expansion. Lena nearly choked laughing. I threw a pencil at both of them. Over the next few weeks the company transformed. Clients returned, impressed by our resilience. New investors signed on. The press called it the comeback of the year. Lena started wearing sunglasses indoors like some kind of celebrity handler. And through it all Kieran stayed, equal partner, occasional nightmare, constant enigma. We fought, of course. He was infuriating, overprotective, arrogant. But there were nights when we stayed late in the office, going over projections, when the city lights glowed outside, the windows, and his voice dropped low and warm, as he explained some demonic loophole he'd closed for us. Nights when his hand brushed mine as we both reached for the same file. Nights when I realized I didn't just want him for the company's survival anymore. It was Lena, of course, who caught us first. She walked in one evening to find Kieran leaning over my chair, pointing at a spreadsheet, while my heart performed Olympic gymnastics in my chest. Uh-huh, she said slowly. Totally about profit margins. Definitely no romantic tension here. None at all. I threw another pencil at her. She smirked and left. The real shift came one Friday night. Everyone else had gone home. The office was quiet. The city beyond the windows humming softly. I turned to Kieran. Do all your contracts end like this? He leaned against the table, watching me with that unreadable gray gaze. Like what? With more than signatures, I said carefully. His smile was small, genuine in a way I rarely saw. Only the important ones. The silence stretched, warm this time. When he finally kissed me, it wasn't the sharp, dangerous thing I'd expected. It was slow, certain, like signing a deal we both wanted. 6 months later, Lumatech was thriving. The office had tripled in size. Investors adored us. The competitors who tried to destroy us had disappeared into obscurity, their demonic partner long gone. And Kieran? He was still impossible, still infuriating, still mine. One evening, as we wrapped up a meeting, he handed me a folder labeled Future Projections. For the company? I asked. He smiled. For us? And for once, I didn't feel like running from the fine print.